Hello, everybody, and welcome to our PDA National Town Hall for March 29th, 2026. I'm Alan Minsky, Executive Director of Progressive Democrats of America. We hold these every week on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Of course, they started out in response to the COVID pandemic, hence the unique time that we have it on, the Sunday afternoon. But they morphed into a weekly town hall where we cover all subjects under the sun, especially as they pertain to the progressive movement in the United States of America. As you can probably tell, I have a slightly different background than normal, somewhat more generic, and I'm actually dismayed. I agree we should be a totally secular society, but they did used to always leave one great work of literature in hotel rooms when I was a kid, and that's not the case anymore. There's no copies of the Bible. Now, maybe it doesn't have to be the Bible, but it could be some great work of literature. It should just surprise us with a great book. They don't do that anymore. Alas, folks, we have an incredible town hall. In fact, we have two, so to speak, A-list guests on this featured guests on this particular town hall. We have recently elected Adelita Grijalva, and while Dan O'Neill from Arizona will be introducing Adelita, I just want to hear her reflections on what it's like in the middle of this term of the 119th Congress to, appear on Capitol Hill and what that all looks like and what she sees as promising, and what, of course, has been so foreboding about where Trump is taking this country, where the Trump administration is taking this country, with the Republicans controlling the other two houses of Congress. So she'll be on, and she'll also be on along with a fantastic California candidate for Congress. I don't have my notes in front of me right now in this hotel room, but I think it's the 26th district. He'll correct us. He'll give us the right district. His name is Chris Espinosa. He's running in an open seat. And the competition is going to be in the primary between himself and a very, very conservative Democrat named Jackie Irwin. And we're certainly looking forward to getting behind Chris's campaign. And he knows Adelita, so they're going to be on together in the second half of the show. So look forward to that. It's going to be incredible. The other A-list guest we have is Phyllis Bennis. And we could not have a better guest on to talk about the crises in the Middle East, to talk about the still hot crises facing the Palestinian people in relationship to Gaza and the West Bank, but also now the war on Iran. And I, by the way, have to applaud The Guardian and the editors there for continually referring to it, not the war in Iran or the war with Iran, but the war on Iran. I think that's largely accurate, especially as to how this war began. So all that is coming up today. And look, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank a lot of people for sending me condolences and well wishes as word spread through the broader PDA grapevine that my mother died on Wednesday. And hence, I'm here in this hotel room in Providence, Rhode Island. And first of all, I want to say that I know from the bottom of my heart that my mom would want me to interrupt my work schedule just briefly. Of course, she definitely would want me to honor and respect and love the passing of a human soul as much as possible. Something I really feel that American culture, among our many foibles, the repression of the fact of death and the way that we contend with it in our culture, I've for a long time thought is getting seriously weakened, and it's a part of the poverty of American culture and the postmodern, after modernity era that we've all lived through. And yet I also know that she would not want me to not interrupt my work. My mom was very, very happy that I got involved in whatever you want to call this, left progressive politics. She adhered to these politics her entire life. And I don't want to choke up on this call, but as I wrote to the staff, and the one really resonant line I wrote to the staff in announcing the passing of my mother was that, I will do my best by her my entire life going forward. And a big part of that is the politics that we all on this call share. And they are politics that are about trying to improve the condition for every human. And then, as I was telling the staff right before the call in the green room, so to speak, yes, no surprise here. A couple of my relatives on my mom's side, just a couple. Most of them are Democratic leaning independents. And I'm in Rhode Island, so very much been a Democratic controlled state. And a lot of them still live here. But, or they're Democrats, and some of them are even Democratic activists. One fantastic person, still at 90 years old, tied into the struggle to save the post office. But a couple Trumpsters, and one even who I knew when I was much younger, and thought of always as one of the great sort of liberal hopes of the family in terms of what I thought her very pro-feminist approach to entering into her. She was a decade older than me, but I knew her when I was very young. And, she got to college, got through college, got a law degree, was going to fight for the people. And boy, does she sound like Fox News talking points. But alas, here I am, and onwards for all of us. And yes, onwards in the spirit of Esther Minsky. So thank you for all your well wishes. A lot of love back to everybody. And with that, we're going to have three speakers in the next 10 minutes. We're going to, in a moment, hear from Mike Fox with our PDA to-dos for the week. And then we're going to hear from Donna Smith. But first, young Mr. William Walter, who not only can give us a little overview of what happened on No Kings Day yesterday, but also since he was involved in the No Kings demonstration in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Take it away, William. You got about 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 3. Mr. Walter, is he here? I knew he was.
Yeah, that multitasking machine was hopping from his car to his computer,
He needs to
and
be
he
on.
should now be there.
He's here. He just needs to be unmuted, is what the message was.
There we
Yep,
go.
he's good.
Hello, everybody. Hello, PDA family. It's so good to see all of you. You might be able to see now that I'm zooming in a little bit. I got a little bit of a burn on my forehead from the wind yesterday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But yeah, I was on the steering committee for No Kings 3 here in Milwaukee, and the turnout was fantastic. It was a little bit down from No Kings 1 and 2 in terms of total bodies. However, there was 3 or 4 different No Kings events, all within about a 10 to 15 minute span of Milwaukee. So while we had less people at our big event, we had more people coming out in the city in totality. We also moved the event from dead center of downtown, where it had been for the first 2, to a park in a more I don't know how to properly phrase this, but a community that's less engaged, let's say, in politics. It's more of a community park rather than a city park, about 5 to 10 minutes outside the major downtown metropolitan area of Milwaukee. And we had live music. We had food trucks coming in from all over the area. We had over 50 different organizations sign up for our community fair that we held right before No Kings officially started. And the whole point of this was to try to build camaraderie in the community, to remind people that we will never out-network or out-fundraise the billionaires. It's mathematically impossible. 6 men have more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans combined. But we outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1. We can outwork them and we can out-organize them because we have each other, and we always will. There were gubernatorial candidates who set up their booth at our event fair to be able to get around and talk to the people of Wisconsin, to push the issues that matter to them right now, including the booth that was right next to our Wisconsin Revolution booth, where the candidate was talking extensively about a policy that might be very familiar to those of you on this call, the 21st Century Economic Justice Bill of Rights. That booth was immensely popular. It was popping throughout the hour and a half that we were holding our community fair. And the amount of young people and families in particular that were there was something that was really, really inspiring to me, because for the first No Kings in particular, I don't say this to sound, disappointed, but there was a lot of older white folk who attended. And these individuals are going to consistently vote time and time again. They always do, and they always will, and we love them, and they're a core demographic of our progressive movement. But we need to be bringing more of the people who agree with us, but perhaps don't see an accurate position or accurate way of advancing our policies forward electorally. We need to show them that they're wrong by giving them electoral victories that then translate to tangible wins in their community. And we need to show them that while they might always feel alone, they never are, because we have their back and we always will. So we were so excited to be able to bring these different demographics together in this open, large-scale park in Milwaukee County, to remind them that you don't have to retreat to the internet every day. You don't have to spend your weekends inside. You can come out, you can meet your neighbors, you can meet your community. You can get reinvitalized and reinvested in the people that you live around, because we're going to be the ones that continue driving these communities forward. And we know that as we continue to win elections and continue to get these big victories, that it's only going to snowball from there.
Hey, thank you so much, William. And again, William and I are going to be rendezvousing in New Orleans at DNC quarterly meetings in a few weeks. Less than a few weeks, but I said about 10 days from now, and a little bit more than that. And that's going to be something we'll be reporting on coming forward. thank you for all that you do, William Walter. You're the greatest. Take care of that sunburn. And I got a Wisconsin red going there. Let's, by the way, I want to thank everybody for the well wishes again. I should mention, so everybody knows, look, I am suffering slight vertigo from the loss of my mom not being here, but she lived to 97, folks. And I do have to say, that's a beautiful thing. May we all have such long lives. But, to have had somebody with me so deep into my life, it's disorienting to lose the person. But thank you so much for all the beautiful well wishes in the chat. I wish I could respond to all of them, and I love you all. Mike Fox, our PDA news for the week, and then over to Donna Smith.
Fantastic. Can you hear me, Alan?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. All right, gang. To do number one, as always, and it's especially so today. Our to do number one is revel in the fact that you're surrounded by people who get it here. Tough times. This is a space where we all show solidarity with each other, where we all buttress each other and prepare for the work that needs to be done over the upcoming week. And I thank you all for being here. You make me healthier just by being here. So solidarity all. To do number two, take notes. We're going to be throwing a lot of to-dos and important information to you throughout this call. So please do take notes and act upon them, all right? Now, from a time and treasure standpoint, today and moving up through the upcoming week, from a time standpoint, phone bank, phone bank, phone bank. Yesterday, we were all about get in the street, get in the street, get in the street, right? Now, phone bank, phone bank, phone bank. As William had referenced, we have got to bring home victories that turn into policies that make real change in real people's lives. There's our core job here, gang. And we've got candidates all over the country who are running in primaries right now in special elections. And Adelia's special election in New Jersey 11 is coming up on the 14th. So we got to be hitting those phones, hitting those phones, hitting those phones, okay? So if you don't see the link in the chat, go to pdamerica.org/volunteer, toss in an hour. It's a heck of a lot easier than the work that took place yesterday, getting out in the cold and the wind and et cetera, right? From the comfort of your own home, put your feet up on your desk, talk to some PDA people, get them active, okay? So our goal for this call is 20 new phone bankers who are on the call. Toss in the chat that you're a phone banker and ask folks to join, okay? Let's recruit. And with that goal of 20, I'll be checking that out. We'll be back taking a look at where we're at on those goals at the top of the hour, okay? Now, that's the time goal, the treasure goal. Bottom line, gang, we take great pride here at PDA in that the vast majority of our work gets done by volunteers. And that's just spiritually right, by individuals who are taking their civic responsibility seriously. And they're in there swinging, but we still got to keep the lights on. We still have a Zoom bill. We still have a database management tool bill. And we'd like to bring on some more stipended organizers, if at all possible. So we can organize even better on the ground. So. Anything you can do today. Our goal is just solidarity. If it's $1, wonderful. If it's 2, great. If it's 100, wonderful. Anything in between. My primary goal is number 1, solidarity from a donation standpoint. Number 2, sustaining donation. If you can do $1, $2, $5, $10, whatever you can do per month, that makes Alan's job easier, our job easier in budgeting over the upcoming year. Okay, so I have a goal of 10 new sustainers, and let's see if we can make that happen. Thanks so much, y'all. See you back at the top of the hour. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you. And Phyllis Bennis will be up next. But right now, let's hear from PDA's board chair of our advisory board, Donna Smith. Donna, how you doing?
Doing okay, Alan. How are you?
I'm okay. As I said,
No.
yeah, it's strange, but it's sad. It's beautiful. It's difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but I know I'm not anywhere near yet as old as your mom was blessed to live to be.
Yeah.
But I also know what older mothers feel like. And Alan, I can tell you with 100% certainty, your mother was so very proud of you. So proud of you.
Thank you.
And, the love that you're seeing shared here from everybody is just a tiny fraction of what she felt for you. And I know that's hard to feel right now. You've got a lot to deal with, but give yourself space. You're going to make some dumb moves. You're going to fall. You're going to, physically, you're going to have to be careful a little bit. So know that everybody's wrapping you in their arms as much as we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Love you. Thank you.
Love you too. And I can't wait to hear from Phyllis. I was lucky enough to work with Phyllis when I was in DC. So it was a nice time in my life, believe it or not, to work in DC at that time, even as frustrating it was very different than it is now, I'm sure. It's just got to be horrible. But I want to talk a little bit about No Kings in Denver. Denver's groups were large, very large. I went to, I think, 3 sites we drove to. 2 of them looked like one had folded into another, but the third one we went to, people reported to me, was at least twice as big, maybe 3 times as big. So one thing I'm going to take away real quickly from it, because I don't want to delay too much, and I want to share some other words with you. Indivisible gets all the praise and great praise for this work that they've done to organize No Kings and put it together. But I am very worried, and let's not let the DNC or the party take hold of this movement as their own. I saw lots of candidates running around, right, because we went to several events. I saw lots of candidates running around, and that's great. If they're elected officials, that's fine. But I don't want the party to make it a DNC thing. I heard too many people talking about it being the first time they had been out to a protest ever, the first time they had risked that themselves. So let's all be careful not to just claim it's DNC only. So I am going to share my screen with you guys real quick and let somebody speak for me. I hope that will work. If it doesn't work, you all tell me it won't. And here we go.
It's working.
It's working.
Good. I can't get the video to go. I'm so sorry. Here it goes. Here it goes.
You may have to summarize.
Yeah, we're not hearing the audio.
Okay, sorry about that. This is one young woman that I interviewed. I'll stop the screen share. This is one young woman I interviewed. I went all the way down the crowd and interviewed people about why they were there. And there was everything from this one young woman who happens to be a student at Cal Poly, and she was there because she's so deeply concerned about climate change. And she was in Colorado on spring break. That's why she came to that event. Then I walked down. I actually met an almost 90-year-old man. This made me think about your mom a little bit, Alan. An almost 90-year-old man who was there in his lawn chair trying to sit in the shade because it's been unbearably hot in Denver of the last. And I asked him why he was there. And he said he's actually from Iran, believe it or not. And he said in his 67 years of being in this country, he had never seen such a corrupt government and control. And we spoke about the war, and his one word for the war was unnecessary, over and over again. So we had this range of this eloquent young woman to this 90-year-old man saying what he felt. And then I spoke to some young men who were wearing masks because they felt like they didn't want their faces to become part of an AI face identification somehow if things should escalate someday. But they were very peaceful. They were holding signs. And then I saw little children with their parents who had made signs to hold up. Wow, this was powerful stuff that we have to make sure that we encourage people. And PDA, we got to get stickers again. Healthcare Not Warfare Report. We need stickers. Yay! All right, Alan, love you so much. Hang in, take care of yourself. Grief comes in great waves. Let us carry for you what you need to carry, okay?
Well, indeed, and I can tell you, I saw Stephen Spitz. I was in Washington just a week ago, and Stephen Spitz was like, "You got to get more of those healthcare, not warfare stickers everywhere." And so he's exactly on your page on that, Donna. It is my thank you so much, and thank you for your kind words, and again, thank you for everybody and their kind words in the chat. I'm really honored to introduce the next person who actually on the day I heard the news about my mom earlier in the day, I got to spend time with her as she spoke at Occidental College, and that is Phyllis Bennis. And, for years through my time at Pacifica Radio, periodically, we'd get all these people who would be critics of U.S. foreign policy. Some are still with us, some are not, some are active, some are not as much. But no one was as consistently excellent in my experience as Phyllis Bennis has been over the entire time I've been attentive to critics of U.S. foreign policy and calling for an honest international rules-based order that reflects things like international law and justice over the past now 2.5+ decades than Phyllis Bennis. And Phyllis Bennis, just to let folks know, of course, worked at the IPS, the Institute for Policy Studies, with so many people we've loved and appreciated, but most of all among PDA people, Steve Cobble will overlap with you there forever, of course. And she is director of the IPS New Internationalism Project, focusing on the Middle East, particularly Palestinian rights, U.S. militarism, and UN issues. And I know that people here have a question about the efficacy of the UN that we'll get Q&A with Phyllis in a few minutes. And she also serves as an international advisor for organization I'm a member of as well, Jewish Voice for Peace. And her most recent book, just published this year, rather than the past year, is Understanding Palestine and Israel. And welcome, Phyllis Bennis. And please let us know how you see the situation currently in Palestine and also with the war on Iran. Thank you for joining us, Phyllis Bennis.
Thank you so much, Alan. And I share sending condolences with everyone else with the loss of your mom. It was extraordinary that we were talking just a few hours before that.
Right.
But it was great to see you
Yes.
here in the LA area. Thanks to PDA for inviting me today. And thanks for all of your work, everybody, especially on yesterday on No Kings. There was no kings everywhere. Here it was amazing. And people were saying no kings, no war, no genocide, no ICE. Linking together. I was very privileged to speak at the LA No Kings event yesterday, and it was fantastic looking out into this crowd that was not only big and not only incredibly mixed in terms of being multiracial, multigenerational, multigender, all of the different things that make up this country, and knowing that there were something like 35 other protests going on just here in Los Angeles. So I think we did good. I think everybody should be very, very proud of that. And I think we should be very much aware that while it's great that these big, broadly defined protests, whether it was hands off or no kings, are targeting the war now. This is hugely important. It's a problem if they're only being focused, if the war is only a focus because US troops are in harm's way. That's one reason to be against war, but it is never, never the only reason. And I think we have to be very conscious about that. When people are willing to talk about Iran, but not talk about Palestine, if we're talking about Iran only in the context of US troops at risk, we have to be very careful about that. So this is a challenge that we already face. 100 years ago, Gramsci talked about how the old world was dying, the new world had yet to be born, And this was a time of monsters. We are still living, I think, very much in a time of monsters. We have militarism at home, the militarization of ICE, the militarization of local police, the presence of armed soldiers on our streets, and we have militarism abroad. We have wars. The Trump administration has bombed 7 countries in the first year of this term. And then there were the attacks on Venezuela. Then there were the attacks on Iran. Then there were the attacks continuing on Gaza with US weapons and US money. So we are very much in a wartime moment. And the work of PDA and so many other organizations is precisely to challenge that. It's escalating in Iran very quickly. There's constant talk of, well, there are negotiations underway. And then the Iranians say, well, actually, not so much, because there are some talks being exchanged between intermediaries, but there are no direct talks underway. And the Trump administration has been so consistently inconsistent in what it is claiming is even the reason for this war, that it's very hard to see where there might be a serious off-ramp. You know, there are plenty of off-ramps because there's been so many excuses given for this war. We were told that it was a war for many different things. It was a war for nuclear threats. Well, there is no nuclear threat. And we were told that the nuclear threat was destroyed last summer. So, which way do you want to have it? But if you wanted to say there's no more nuclear threat, so we can end the war, that would be one way. We could say that there was a question about the Iranian Navy posed a threat somewhere. Well, they've destroyed the Iranian Navy. If they wanted to use that and say, we've destroyed the Iranian Navy, now we can pull out. There are plenty of things that the Trump administration could do. The problem is they show no indication of having any intention of ending this war very soon. And that's a very dangerous prospect that we have to face. This war is committing enormous war crimes. The very first day, the assassination of the Iranian leader, Ali Khamenei, and the same day, the bombing of the schoolgirls, 175 schoolgirls, mostly between 7 and 12 years old, killed on the very first day of this war. But if we're going to talk about the problems of this war, we also have to look at why it's not senseless. There are reasons, none of them, I think, the reasons that we have been told, but there are reasons. And one of the reasons, I think, is that this war is designed to both consolidate and to demonstrate the fact that the US and Israel, who launched this war together, are claiming their right, as they would see it, to become and remain both the global and the regional hegemonic powers across the Middle East and around the world. So the US is saying this proves we can go to war anywhere we want and we have impunity. We will not be held accountable. And Israel is saying we are going to be the unchallenged hegemon in our region, in the Middle East. And we have impunity as well because we have the US backing us. We have US money, we have US arms, we have US diplomatic protection. We will never be held accountable. And it becomes up to us to hold both of these governments accountable because the illegality of this war is profound and deep. At the domestic level, we know the constitutional issues that only the Senate can declare war and that going to war without such a declaration is clearly unconstitutional. And yet, the Senate over and over again, like the House, reject the War Powers Act. For years, Congress has been turning over to the White House its power to declare war, its power to control a White House that is out of control. All of that has been abandoned out of fear for some of being not elected again, fear of being primaried. For others, it's something else, perhaps, but there is no legitimate reason for Congress to have rejected the War Powers Act. There is no legitimate reason for Congress to continue to turn over its constitutionally mandated power to the White House. And this has been true not only with Republicans in the White House, with Democrats in the White House, with democratically controlled Congresses and Republican controlled Congresses. This is a bipartisan problem that we all face. So this was not a senseless war in the sense of using it to maintain and increase power. It is illegal in international law in one of the most profound ways possible. If we look back at the era when international law, the laws of war, as we understand them now, the Geneva Conventions, etc., were being created, it was in the wake of World War II. It was in the wake of the Holocaust. And at that time, the Nuremberg prosecutors and ultimately the Nuremberg judges made a declaration that of all of the crimes they were dealing with, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, of all of these crimes, that the crime of aggression was what they called the supreme international crime, because all the other war crimes stem from that. If a war is launched illegally, it is a crime of aggression. And this war was launched in complete violation. The UN Charter, which stands very much as the centerpiece of international law, is very, very clear in Article 2 that no nation may go to war against another nation, period, full stop. By the time you get to Article 51, you find out that there are two exceptions to that prohibition, but they are very, very narrow and very, very constricted. So one of them says the use of military force could be legal if it is authorized by the Security Council of the United Nations. Now, we know here that not only did the Security Council not authorize this war, it was never acknowledged as an appropriate institution that had to give its permission. We know that the president has said that the only constraint on his power, in his mind, is, quote, my own moral compass. Really? Now, we all know what that moral compass is all about. He said explicitly, international law is not important. That's what we're dealing with. The second exception to the prohibition on the use of force is if, that's the first condition, an armed attack occurred. Iran had not attacked the United States, period. The other constriction is until the Security Council itself can decide what to do. So what that means is if we were attacked, we would have the right to shoot down a plane that was about to launch another bomb on the United States. That would be that immediate self-defense if an armed attack had occurred. But we could only do that until the Security Council could meet, which would be a matter of hours, not days these days, before it would become illegal again, because the restriction is if an armed attack occurs until the Security Council can meet and decide what to do. So the US stands in complete violation of this supreme international crime, the crime of aggression. In that context, what we see in the Security Council decision, when led by Bahrain, a resolution was put forward that targeted and identified only Iran and condemned Iran for violating international law by its using its own power in self-defense, but in certain ways also illegally, in attacking the countries where US military bases are in the surrounding areas, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, etc. There are 13 US bases that are being used that surround Iran and that are being used to attack Iran. In fact, Iran had a right and has the right of self-defense in that context because an armed attack did occur and is occurring that killed 175 schoolgirls on the first day and assassinated the country's head of government on the first day. Iran did violate international law as well. It violated international law in attacking civilian targets in those countries. That's not legal. The right of self-defense also includes the right of any country that is occupied militarily. Iran was not occupied militarily, but in that case, and we can apply this in other situations, including Palestine as a principle, not necessarily as the chosen strategy. But even there, when the right of the use of armed struggle is made available by international law for an occupied population, it does not apply to armed force against civilians. In this case, Iran had the right to use armed force against the military bases of the government, the military that was attacking it. But the UN resolution only mentioned Iran. It did not even mention that the US and Israel had launched this war. It didn't mention those names. The vote on that was 13 of the 15 countries voted in favor. Russia and China abstained. They didn't use their veto to oppose it. Russia did propose a much broader resolution that said that everyone should stop fighting, all sides, which would have been, in my view, much more useful. But it's not as if Russia has particularly a good reputation for being serious in any other situation. So that was a problem. The vote on that was only 4 countries voting yes, 2 voted no, and 9 abstentions. 9 abstentions, so that it couldn't even be considered. So we have a serious problem at the UN, and I know there was already a question in the chat, which I'll get to in a minute, about uniting for peace. But I think there are enormous problems of legality. I have a new piece coming out, I think tomorrow, in Foreign Policy in Focus that will deal with this issue of illegality, because I think everybody knows, we all know this is illegal. But I think it's hard for a lot of folks to be able to explain to other people who don't understand that exactly why it's illegal under both the domestic law around what the Constitution says about who gets to declare war, and the international law, which is often more complicated. But there's another thing I want to mention before I get to that, and that has to do with this question of the dog and the tail. There's a lot of talk going on right now about whether the dog and the tail, the US and Israel, have switched places. And isn't Iran dragging the US into this war? Isn't this really an Israeli war? And in my view, the answer is no. This is a US war, which also is an Israeli war. The US has wanted to go to war, at least majority factions of the various ruling class forces within the Congress, within the White House, within the Pentagon, among the billionaires, all of them have wanted to go to war against Iran since 1979, since the Iranian Revolution, for a host of reasons that have to do more then than now, but it remains, having to do with oil, having to do with the projection of power, having to do with making sure Israel is granted impunity for everything it does, and in terms of embarrassment. The US was profoundly humiliated with the capture of a number of diplomats who were held in Iran for 444 days, as we all were told, night after night, in Iran after the revolution. And that was a big part of the reason that the US has wanted to go after Iran and overturn this revolutionary process, as long as that's been true, as long as there has been this revolution. Israel has, for many years, identified Iran as an existential threat. Iran is not an existential threat to Israel, to Israelis. It is probably an existential threat in the far future if it ever decided to create a nuclear bomb. Because what it would threaten would be Israel's current nuclear weapons monopoly. Right now, there is one nuclear arsenal in the Middle East, and it does not belong to Iran. It belongs to Israel, which has had an uninspected arsenal of nuclear weapons since the late 1980s, when it was released to the world. The photographs were released to the world by an Israeli whistleblower, who was then arrested and held in solitary confinement for 18 years, ultimately released from prison, but is prohibited from leaving the country. The dog and the tail have not switched places. Since the genocide began under the Biden administration and continuing through the second Trump administration, Israel has been able to claim rightfully that they have more impunity than ever. The US has granted that to Israel. But that does not mean that Israel is more powerful than the United States. The famous statement from Rubio, when he said, "We knew there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that therefore, if we didn't preemptively go after them, when they launched these attacks, we would suffer higher casualties." apparently it never occurred to anybody to suggest to the Israelis that they not attack Iran. And therefore there wouldn't be a retaliation because there wasn't anything to retaliate against, and they wouldn't have had to go to war against Iran. That's an issue of timing. And I think that Rubio's statement did indicate that Netanyahu was influential in the timing. But I think it's very important that we not let the US off the hook. This is not Israel pulling a reluctant, peace-loving government, or even a reluctant isolationist government, into an unwanted war. So I think we have to be very, very careful about this. And in that context, I think that when we see what's happened in Tehran, for example, people are talking about the Gazification of Tehran, that parts of Tehran are being pummeled, are being destroyed. We have to remember that the origins in terms of timing of this particular war against Iran, because remember, George Bush in 2007 almost went to war against Iran. One of the reasons he didn't, we found out later, was because of the extraordinary mobilization against him when he went to war in Iraq, particularly February 15th, which I think many people on this call may have participated in, February 15th of 2003, when people around the world said no to war. And somewhere between 14 and 16 million people around the world on that day mobilized to say no to Bush's war. He didn't want to go through that again, and that was one of the big reasons why he did not go to war then against Iran, based on a lie. Again, based on the lie of weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. It's important to recognize that the claim that Iran is a nuclear threat, is about to get a nuclear weapon, even both before and after Trump claimed that he had destroyed all the nuclear capacity, is a lie. It simply is not true. And as of, I think the most recent report was, I think October of last year, so just a few months ago, the so-called intelligence community, as they like to call themselves, the 16 intelligence agencies of the US, issued their annual report that said explicitly, again, as they have every year, Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. That the leadership of Iran, I'm sorry, this was a little earlier than that. This was in March of 2025. I'm just checking my notes here. In March of 2025, it's not building a nuclear weapon. Khamenei, who was still alive at the time, had not reauthorized a nuclear weapons program. So the notion that there was some kind of imminent threat is a lie. The only threat that Iran poses in the region in terms of nuclear anything is that if it ever decided sometime in the future, it would be a threat to the monopoly held by Israel's nuclear arsenal. And I should say, in light of the fact that the Israeli nuclear arsenal has never been acknowledged by the Israeli government, they cling to something called I'm forgetting the term. It'll come to me in a minute, but they basically don't either confirm or deny. Strategic ambiguity, that's the term. Strategic ambiguity says they will neither confirm nor deny that they have a nuclear arsenal. The US, unfortunately, officially abides by that strategic ambiguity and doesn't acknowledge the Israeli nuclear arsenal either, except on a few occasions when both US and Israeli officials have slipped and have made some reference to it. But the world knows it exists. And the problem is, no one has inspected it. The UN weapons inspectors from the IAEA have never been allowed to inspect. So we don't know. This was created in the 80s. Are those weapons now dripping radioactive liquids, radioactive air, into the air, into the water, into the land? They're located in a research lab in Dimona, in a town in the Israeli Negev. That town, Dimona, was just hit a couple of weeks ago by a missile, which may have been an Iranian missile aimed at Israel, which was attacking them. It may have been a US missile that went astray. It may have been, we don't know. It could have been almost anything else. It could have been an Israeli missile, but some missile hit it. And there was an immediate statement that no worries, nobody was hurt. It's like, yeah, well, okay, no people were hurt, but what about those bombs? What happened to them? There is no knowledge. We don't know if they are already putting people at risk because the bombs themselves have become unaccountable in a sense. And then, putting aside all of the legality stuff, we get to the costs of this. I think some of you know the work of the IPS project, the National Priorities Project, which works on this issue of the costs of war and the trade-offs of what that money could be used for. And one of the things they have determined lately is that the war in Iran is costing just about $1 billion a day, probably significantly more now. This was from a couple of weeks ago. And over the course of just 1 year, the money that would be spent on a war in Iran, destroying people, killing people, it's killed already somewhere over 1,400 Iranian civilians, starting with the 175 schoolgirls, destroying massive amounts of buildings across the country. If instead that money could be kept at home, it could pay for Medicaid for all 16 million people who are going to lose their healthcare coverage because of Trump's policies next year, and all 41 million people who are relying on SNAP food aid and are at risk of losing that. What would keep us safer? I think that's the question that a lot of members and supporters of PDA will be asking. And we're in a very powerful position right now because the polls indicate that popular opinion is powerfully on our side. You know, if you go back to the war in Iraq, in the weeks just before the US launched the war in the March of 2003, 72% of the people in this country were saying, yay, let's go to war, let's get them. This time around, 3 days before the US went to war in Iran, 18% said that would be a good idea. 18, that's all. And that was at a time when the US was actually negotiating with Iran. They had been meeting in Oman under the leadership of the Omani foreign minister. They were set to have another meeting 3 days later. And instead, just like the US had done while Israel was bombing Iran back in June, the US began bombing Iran in the middle of those negotiations. So this is what we're dealing with here, with massive opposition. There's never been a war in this country that was as massively opposed in the modern world since this one. In the first days, not surprisingly, the support for the war went up a little bit, again, because US troops are now at risk, but it only went up to 25%. It's now vacillating around. It's still, I don't know where it is today. It's been moving around, but we are still looking at 59% of the population is against this war. That puts us in the position of representing that majority. This is not a silent majority anymore. We are out in the streets. This is the same thing we're seeing with the question of genocide in Gaza. We are seeing a situation where the public opinion is massively different than what the leadership of both parties are, but particularly what the leadership of the Democratic Party is saying. 77% of Democratic voters say no more military aid to Israel. 61% of all voters say that. So we are on the side of the vast majority. It's the leadership, the elected leadership of the Democratic Party that is saying, oh, we can't do that. It might be political suicide. You know, this is a whole new war. It's a whole new world. And even though it's not the new world that we're fighting for yet, Gramsci was right about that. It is a very different set of circumstances in which we are doing that work. So I'm going to stop there and mention one other thing about Uniting for Peace and then open it up for the other questions. I know there's a lot of talk these days about Uniting for Peace. Uniting for Peace is a precedent that was set at the United Nations in 1950. It's what allowed the US to go to war in Korea in the name of the United Nations. Basically, what they did, they looked at the UN Charter that says only the Security Council can take up issues of international peace and security. The General Assembly, which of course is far more democratic, it's every country in the UN is a member of the Assembly, and there are no vetoes, unlike in the Council, that the Assembly can take up economic issues and political issues and all kinds of issues, but not issues of peace and security. That belongs to the Security Council. So that was kind of a problem for the US because the Soviet Union was clearly going to veto their efforts to get the Council to endorse a US war in Korea, right, in 1950. So they tricked them. And they managed to get a vote at a moment that the Soviet Union had left the Council briefly in protest of who was representing China at that time. This was right after the Chinese Revolution, of course. And they got a vote passed in the Council, where the Soviets were gone, that said that in a certain circumstance, the General Assembly would be allowed to take up the question of war and peace. And that circumstance would be if the Security Council is paralyzed and because of a veto and could not make a decision, the General Assembly, which is ordinarily prohibited from talking about war and peace, could take up the issue of war and peace and could make recommendations to the member states for what they should do about that threat to international peace and security, something they would never ordinarily be allowed to do. That has been used 10 times. One time in the question of Palestine, back in 1977. Since 1977, that was the 10th session, what they call the 10th session of Uniting for Peace. It has been convened, I think, about 27, 28 times on the issue of Israeli occupation and most recently, Israeli genocide. So a resolution was brought to the General Assembly after, of course, it was vetoed in the Security Council, that included an incredible array, a menu of sanctions, of punishments of Israel, all designed to end the genocide and indeed to end the entire occupation. Because what had happened was the International Court of Justice had issued two incredibly important and astonishing decisions. One was its preliminary decision in the South African case, bringing up charges of genocide against Israel because of Gaza. The other, and that included in their preliminary decision, 6 demands on Israel, starting with stop killing people. It didn't use the word ceasefire, but that was the first demand. There were 5 others. The second was an advisory opinion that had been requested by the General Assembly 2 years earlier. They had taken a very long time. It was to make a determination about the legality of Israel's occupation.
Right now,
Because Israel's occupation had always been assumed to be legal, even though they were committing war crimes within it, collective punishment, stealing land, settlers stealing land and homes, people being expelled from their homes. All of these were war crimes. But the occupation itself had never been identified that way. And in their opinion, in their advisory opinion, they called on Israel to do all kinds of things, including to demolish the settlements, to evacuate, that was the word they used, to evacuate all the settlers within 1 year. That year ended this past December. And a bunch of other things. But crucially, what it also did was to pose a number of recommendations to member states in order to make Israel abide by this resolution. And that ranged from sanctions, it was banking sanctions, trade sanctions, sports sanctions, all kinds of sanctions, and an arms embargo, arms limitations, very tight arms limitations. All of that was taken under the terms of Uniting for Peace. Now, as we all know, a few very brave countries have tried to do 2 or 1 of those things, but the vast majority of the world's governments have not. There are campaigns underway in all those countries to make those governments do it. The same thing would be true if there were to be a Uniting for Peace resolution calling, for example, for an international force to force Israel to stop bombing Iran. That would then make it legal for any group of countries to attack the Israeli military and prevent it from carrying out these bombings. But it would not happen because there is not a single country in the United Nations or anywhere else that is prepared to send military force against Israel, nor are they prepared to send military force against the United States. And when you have the US and the US and Israel committing this crime of aggression, when they are the two countries that no country is prepared to go up against militarily, that's when you have a huge problem of enforcement of anything, including uniting for peace. I know there's a lot of people saying that if we could just pass a Uniting for Peace resolution on Palestine, it would end the genocide. And it won't, because they have passed the Uniting for Peace resolution on Palestine. It's there as a tool. It's there as a tool for us in the United States, and it's there particularly as an incredibly important, useful tool for people in all the other countries who can do what they did in the 1980s in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. When the same thing happened, all these resolutions for sanctions, arms embargoes, banking sanctions, all that stuff against apartheid South Africa, brought to the Security Council, vetoed by the United States, and then brought to the General Assembly, and then passed with enormous majorities. What happened was people around the world said, we are going to be the enforcers of that international law. We are going to pressure our governments across Europe, across Latin America, in much of Africa, all around the world. Government after government after government was passing laws imposing arms embargoes, imposing sanctions, banking sanctions, all the things that the resolution called for, because people were saying it may not be enforceable legally by the UN, but we don't want to live in a country that violates international law. So we are demanding that our government do this. And eventually enough of them did that the US was prepared to change its own position and allow the powerful anti-apartheid movement in this country to win. And they won in the Congress. Reagan vetoed it. They overrode the veto. And the US finally, too late, but finally imposed sanctions on apartheid South Africa, paving the way for the South Africans to do for themselves what they finally managed to do, which is to overthrow apartheid. The challenge we face is that as horrific as the conditions were facing Black South Africans, they were not facing a daily genocide. They were not being killed by weapons of mass destruction every day, as are the Palestinians in Gaza. So we don't have the 10 years to wait for that to happen. We need to figure out new strategies. The people around the world need to figure out those new strategies. And what we do today is going to determine whether that happens or not. The same with Iran. We have an obligation today to stop our government from doing what they are doing. And what everybody else around the world can do is going to be hugely important in the United Nations, in other arenas. But we have the primary responsibility because it's being done with our tax dollars and with our name. Thank you.
Phyllis Bennis, I'm going to thank you so much. Now, for Donna and Beth, and Donna, we'll hear from you for a second, but for Beth and Kate and Neil and Michelle and John and Dorothy, and Moji and John, if you all could just write me, I'll pass your questions on to Phyllis. We do have a sitting congresswoman coming up in a second, and this is on me, it's not on Phyllis, we're going too long. I was about ready to stop Phyllis about 10 minutes ago, but you then went on to speak about not just what you and I spoke about, as I asked you to clarify around what the UN's capacity was when I saw you on Wednesday, but actually that was a question completely independent of any dialogue between me and them from our two co-coordinators of our Stop End Wars and Occupations internal working group. So Jim Carpenter and Mike Giago both asked that question about the UN and its capacity. So as you went on that volley, I let you continue, but we're out of time. And that was brilliant.
Sorry.
No, it was brilliant. No, it was on me. I saw your note finally, and I missed it initially about you asking me to just interrupt. And I was going to write it about one, but then you started right on the subject that Jim and Mike had asked about. And I wanted to respect their question, and the answer was absolutely thorough. And again, unfortunate in its reality that it poses, but then again, you ended with what needs to be done. and what we all have to do here and what our moral obligation is. It's certainly something that PDA fully supports. So thank you again for your guidance, and just any final thought as we close out. And again, everybody who has a question for Phyllis Bennis, please write myself, write also staff at pdamerica.org, and we'll make sure we get the questions onto Phyllis. But a final thought as we close out.
Well, just one point, just in terms of resources, IPS has just posted a what are we calling it? A Iran reader on our website, ips-dc.org, that has all of my pieces, all of Curry Peterson Smith, my partner, his pieces, and then others from other projects at IPS. So take a look at that. There's a lot of the background stuff. As I mentioned, I'll have a new piece on FPI, on foreign policy and focus tomorrow on the legality. Curry has a new one up on FPIF today on the Israel link, who's the dog, who's the tails. More broadly, I think we were all inspired yesterday by the No King stuff. I was particularly thrilled that there were so many. It wasn't just me, in this, when I was speaking. I was the only speaker that spoke directly to the question of war and occupation. But, at the end, when I challenged people, say it together, no kings, no war, no genocide, no ICE, people responded with all of it. And then I'll say right now what I ended with there, because, some people in Hollywood have gotten it right. We saw it on the Oscars, we saw it at the Emmys, and I said, go justice, stop war, fuck ICE, and free Palestine.
I'm forgetting the name of the great actor from One Battle After Another, who of course said that. Benicio del Toro. And from the words of Benicio del Toro and Phyllis Bennis, thank you so much from all of us here at PDA. And we'll, of course, continue to work together in solidarity. Thank you, Phyllis Bennis.
Thank you.
And Dan, hold on 1 minute. Mike Fox, if you can come forward. Just quickly, very quick, without listing people's names, remind people to sign up for phones and in your inimicable way and for donating to PDA.
Well, I've got a little bit of a curveball for you. I don't see Adelita. So
oh no, Dan says
she's here, Mike. She's here.
Under what name?
Her name, Adelita Grijalva.
Adelita, I believe.
There she is, hot dog. Thank you. Boom, boom. We're cooking with gas. My apologies for being the weak link in the button pushing, gang. And if there is no better fundraising pitch than we'd love to hire some wonderful, technologically competent, probably 27-year-old to take this away from Mike Fox. So in any event, nothing but love, gang. Thanks to everybody who's donated, and thanks to everyone who has volunteered so far. We're still way short on both goals, but I certainly understand why, because Phyllis was rocking it. That's why. So in any event, if you'd be so kind, if you don't see the link in the chat, go to pedamerica.org. And please, folks, don't be raising your hands yet. Alan will call for questions. Thank you. Thank you. You all rock. And if you don't see the links, go to pdamerica.org, hit the donate link, hit the volunteer link. Just bottom line, let's get active here and make this our most productive Sunday town hall in forever. Okay, let's make it happen. Back to you, Alan.
Well, I couldn't be happy about the role that PDA played in helping elect one of the newest members of Congress. And that is, of course, the great congresswoman from Southern Arizona, Adelita Grijalva, following the footsteps of her great father, Raul Grijalva. And there's no better person to introduce Adelita to this PDA's town hall than our Arizona state coordinator, Dan O'Neill. Dan, take it away.
Thank you so much. Alan, can you hear me okay? You can. Okay. I was just so excited everybody's here, excited about hearing Phyllis Bennis. If I was president of the United States, she would be my Secretary of State for sure. Let me just say, Adelita Grijalva, Arizona 7, Tucson. She's our rock star here in Arizona. She's on the streets. She's on the battleground fight against ICE. Adelita's for Medicare for all. She does not take any super PAC money. She will not take APAC money or democracy, democratic democracy for Israel, whatever they call it nowadays. And we're going to bring on Chris Espinosa. Also, if Mike, you can put him wherever you need to.
Yep.
Oh, he's there. Okay. So with that said, Adelita Grijalva, it's all yours. Go ahead. Thank you, sister.
Thank you all so much. Well, I'm back in Tucson, which means I am running around with kids and life, which is great. And so I am about 3 minutes away from like a stop. Otherwise, I'm driving, which is probably not, the safest thing to do. But I think it's really important for me to join you all because I have to continue to thank PDA for your support. I mean, the #1 phone bank helpers and volunteers were all PDA volunteers. Your presence in people that were coming to door knock or talking to people, that support has been so invaluable. So I just want to continue to, in these spaces right now and in this time where we don't always feel like what we're doing is productive, maybe we don't always feel like we're making a difference. You are making a huge difference. And not just in my race, but in all the races that need the kind of support that you can provide. Continue to show up. I went to No Kings. I literally got off the plane and drove over to Freed Park and had the opportunity to speak to a pretty good crowd. And the reason why there weren't more at the bandshell is because they were on the street. They were in several locations in Tucson and in Nogales and Bisbee. I mean, we were all over CD7. I couldn't get everywhere, which I really would love to do because we're all feeling this need to stand up and fight for our democracy. We need to fight for our First Amendment, have to fight for, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom to protest. So the more and more we do, I talked to several people, variety of ages, who had never, ever protested before in their life, and they were there. And when we bring people into any of these spaces, remember to bring more. Bring 5 people along, because it doesn't matter whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, a democratic socialist, an independent, as my dad was for a long time, part of the Raza Unida party. We're all scared for our democracy, and we all have to stand up and fight. So I know that Chris is on, and I'm obviously will be on to take questions, but I just want to sincerely thank you all for keeping our rights in the forefront and protecting our people and our community. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. And Adelita, my one question for you, of course, first I want to introduce Chris, is just what did you find when you got to DC? What has exceeded expectations? What's been worse? What's been better? But of course, in the spirit of, well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my dad was there for 22 years. And I have to say that Congress is gone, sadly. A Congress where, you could disagree politically, but still be civil to each other. Those people are few and far between. So for me, there's just not governing. They don't know how to work together, nor do they know how to work with us. So there's a lot of time and effort and energy spent on things that are not productive. I mean, so when we are spending time in a committee and voting on a shower act, it's literally called the Shower Act. And what it was is to take water saving, the requirement to put water saving in shower heads, like that designation. That was an actual vote in Congress, and I wish it was deeper than that, but it wasn't. We also, the following week, had a vote on appliances to take away energy saving designation from our appliances. I mean, so that's the kind of stuff that we're spending significant time on. An attack on the trans community, the GOP, who used to be the party of, less government, literally are doing everything they can to manage our thoughts, our perspectives, our personhood as often as possible. So there's a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of gaslighting of our communities. And so I'm proud to, as often as I can, speak to, people that are podcasters, that are influencers, that are talking about issues in a different way, because I feel part of what we have to do in our responsibility is to reach people where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one person who did that tremendously, incredibly well throughout his whole career was your father. And one of the things that happened in American politics, I think, over the past 4 to 5 years was, to a shocking degree, a degree to which traction was gained by Donald Trump in the American Latino communities. And I think this was once so much on account of his magnetism, however one wants to view that, as the failings of the mainstream of the Democratic Party, something that Raul Grijalva never had to worry about because he always spoke to the needs of the people in his constituency. And I met Chris Espinosa at the California Democratic Party convention recently, and right away I recognized a young man who is in the total tradition of Raul Grijalva. And so I'm very excited to have Chris with us today. And I think this is probably going to be the first of a few meetings we may have with Chris. We will be going through a formal endorsement project, which is going to be a slam dunk in California 26 for PDA, because Chris is the candidate who fully stands in alignment with everything that we stand for. And by the way, Adelita dropped, and I'm letting her back in. We were struggling with her connection because she was driving was rough, but she's coming back in. But with that said, Chris Espinosa, I know the minute you start talking about what you stand for, everybody at PDA is going to get it. So welcome, Chris Espinosa, to your first PDA town hall. He's running in the open seat of California's 26th district. Maybe now it's a little bit changed because of all that happened in California with the districts. So in the course of what you say, Chris, let us also know about who was the incumbent who stood down, is retiring. Who's your major rival? Who is Jackie Irwin, a very conservative Democrat? You don't say much about her. I'll say that if you like. And tell us all about yourself and why your politics match up with the district as it's now drawn in California's 26th district.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. And I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. I know how heartbreaking that can be. And I know that you're grieving. And the fact that you got on this call with us all speaks to just your commitments to social justice and advocacy of communities. And I'm sure that some of that was an outgrowth of your mother's example. And so just know that you have my deep condolences. And, I also want to just acknowledge my friends, Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, for coming on here. I think, she represents exactly the kind of leadership that we need in Congress. We all saw what Adelita went through. Even take her that she was duly elected to. And within days of her getting elected, she was in her district. There was an ICE raid blocks from where she was. She was the first one on the front lines being pepper sprayed in the face for it. But defending her community. And that's the kind of member of Congress that I want to be. I want to be like Adelita Grijalva, because we need that level of courage right now from our elected leaders. Gone are the days when strongly worded letters are what we have come to expect from our elected leaders. We need more than that. We need leaders like Adelita in Congress and hopefully taking on leadership roles within the Democratic caucus so that we can have a path forward. That's why I'm running for Congress. I want to be there to support progressive members like Adelita. As I see it, we have 3 intersecting crises right now. We have a crisis of an oppressive cost of living. Everything is going up, and we feel that particularly hard in the 26th congressional district, which is most of Ventura County, a little bit of LA County. The median home price in this district is nearing $1 million. And while wages have flatlined, everything is going up. The cost of goods, the cost of gas, and we know what some of those drivers are. We know that Donald Trump's ego, his just lack of any intellectual capacity whatsoever on things like tariffs, on getting us into an unjustified, illegal war, as was described in tremendous detail earlier. All of those are having effects on all of our communities, but especially the most vulnerable. So that's why I'm here to fight for healthcare as a human right, for Medicare for all. I think I saw earlier that the indefatigable Nina Turner was also on this call. She's been in that fight for some time, and I'm willing to join her in that. We need free public college and vocational trade school. We need universal childcare. All of those things will help us bend the cost of living downward so that communities can thrive. And then we have a second crisis, Alan. And that second crisis is a crisis of climate and environmental injustice. I know that issue far too well. I had the deep privilege and joy of my career working for Congresswoman Grijalva's father as a senior member of the staff on the House Committee on Natural Resources. And I saw Chairman Grijalva literally remake the federal legislative process so that it was more participatory, so that communities that were most impacted by the issue of climate change and environmental injustice were driving the solutions from the forefront of the policy development process. And that's what I want to help to continue. I will be the first co-sponsor on the Donald McEachin Environmental Justice for All Act, which in my view should include Congressman Raul Grijalva's name, since he was the driving force of that effort. And for those of you who haven't seen, Adelita Grijalva, in partnership with Representatives Lee and Representative Tlaib, just announced the enactment of a House Environmental Justice Caucus, where they will continue that legacy of participatory policymaking on environmental justice to expand and strengthen the Civil Rights Act in an environmental context, to address cumulative pollution impacts, and most importantly, to ensure public input in environmental decision makings that is outcome determinative, so that communities have a real voice in the decisions that impact their life and their quality of health. So those are all major priorities. I also grew up in Santa Paula in the district, where our town was nearly obliterated by the Thomas Fire. But for the right wind conditions, the entire town would have been wiped out. So we are on the front lines here of the climate crisis. Ventura County is one of, if not the fastest warming counties in the continental United States. And we need to restore the investment in a clean energy, ensure good union paid jobs as we get away.
I think we might have lost Chris for a second.
I know what that's like, though. You want to be able to fit everything into your schedule.
Yeah, no, and we
You're just
love
like,
it when
try.
we love it when the candidates are out going from place to place on our town halls. But your
Yeah.
thoughts on Adelita and everything Chris was saying there, and
You know, one I appreciate very much him acknowledging his role on the with my dad. I think that work is really critically important, and it is the foundation of how I think legislation should be created always in community and with those who are most impacted. What has been really great about this partnership between Lee, Talib, and I is that we are three women of color representing communities that all have Superfund sites in them, that are all continually dealing with the consequences of environmental pollution, and that there are no one is held responsible but the communities left to hold that are holding the bag to clean it up. Every single one of us has had to deal with illness in our own individually as their own people, but also in our families and in our communities as a result of this. And, my dad died of a very aggressive cancer that I feel very strongly his body was compromised by drinking poisoned water for over a decade. And, we have thyroid cancer, so many different ailments in the community that my dad grew up in a 6-block radius, three young men, 19 years old, testicular cancer. That's not normal. Like having thyroid cancer is not normal. But some of the cancers were so rare they couldn't identify them. But it was like, wait, do you live in 817? Do you live in 85706? Because there's a lot of cancers in your neighborhood. Well, where do you think that happened? So I just think that putting that emphasis on the environmental impact, but also bringing in civil rights organizations, which is something that is part of now this Environmental Justice Caucus, is really, I think, going to be the opportunity we have to get a lot more people invested in talking about how environmental pollution and climate crisis is the biggest issue that we have to deal with after changing this administration. And also, let's acknowledge the fact that it hasn't mattered what party has been in power. There are some issues that they have ignored because it's predominantly people of color and people living in poverty that are the ones that are dealing with the consequences. So putting this information forward is something I hope Chris joins me very soon, because he's so incredibly knowledgeable on these issues, and his expertise will be very helpful in moving all of this kind of legislation forward.
Welcome back, Chris. And but we have Dan O'Neill, I know, wants to chime in, and Donna Smith, and then take it away, guys.
Thank you. I had a quick question for Adelita. Adelita, what would you say to Chris that's going to help him out in the coming weeks?
Oh, I've offered as much opportunity to, when you want to scream, feel free to call me. I'm going to start pulling your hair out in chunks. Feel free to call me, because, there's pros and cons to the way that the special election happened with me, is that it was a very compressed period of time, having to do all of the fundraising, all of the outreach, all of the creation of all of these, who do you have on the consultant team? Who's part? There are all these questions that come up in running a congressional campaign that we had to figure out in 3 months. So pros and cons to that sort of major run, but also who are the people and organizations that are really there that are going to be very helpful and benefit you? And what are the ones that maybe you don't put as much effort into chasing that endorsement because ultimately, it's not super fruitful, or the promise of a lot of volunteers that doesn't ever happen. I think with me, and I know that this is true with Chris, a lot of times the endorsements that we want to get are because they're organizations that we believe in and that they match where we are. And so we do that, whether it's going to be hugely beneficial or not. I think that I feel proud of the union endorsements and the environmental groups and labor in general. Those are all things that I'm proud of. But some of them I have talked to since then saying, do you have to have a 28-page endorsement questionnaire? Perhaps whittle that down a little bit. Do we have to have 17 different candidate forums?
Donna, I see Donna has her camera on. Oh,
yeah. I see her.
It's always such an honor to see you. Thank you for being on with us today. And I put the picture of your dad and me behind.
I saw it.
Cutie, yes, thank you. he was such a good guy, just a great guy, but you know that.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed with your work on climate. I'm very unimpressed with this Congress's work on climate.
Yeah.
What, we just heard Phyllis Bennis tell us it's our duty to fight on the genocide and on those issues. What can we do to push harder on our members on this, on climate? What can we do?
I think really bringing it to the forefront and reminding them that this is critically important. One of the things that we as Democrats have been criticizing is the role of billionaires in making our laws and their influence over our elections. But also, once in elected office, you have to continue to push back on the environmental polluters. They're making billions off of poisoning like people of color. They're poisoning people in poverty that don't have a voice. And the other thing is, I always find it fascinating that we can find money for war. We can find money to get tax breaks. It's really fine, apparently, for us to get into trillions of dollars in debt. But we can't find the funding, or Democrats, it's our responsibility to figure out where the money's going to come from for Medicare for all, for environmental justice for all, for the Green New Deal. We have to figure where, universal childcare, as free as possible, public education, higher education, and then really investing in our public schools. All of those things we have to have a plan for. And our plan as Democrats cannot be, I'm better than the other guy. Like, we have to see tangible results happen and quickly. And so one of the things, whether you like it or not, Trump went in there with I have a project, I'm going to do it. And they did. So we have to come up with a project that's going to motivate people that have been turned off of both political parties respectfully to say, so what is it that you are fighting for? And it can't just be fighting. That was one thing that I learned very clearly from my dad. And it's like, you can have a lot of fight. And I've always been a Bendonera, so that's not a surprise. My name literally means fighter. So that's not something that I'm afraid of. But you have to be purposeful on what you're willing to, where is it that you're going to stand and what you're going to do. Because I hear the arguments, well, you're fighting, but what are we accomplishing? And that's part of the problem. And when we have the gavel, we can't just throw our hands up as progressives to say, well, we're not in power. It's like, that's where you have to support people like Chris, because I know where he's going to stand. Yeah. It doesn't matter what other influences are coming in. And those candidates that made promises that are not doing their part, there has to be consequences for that. And you as organizations who support us have to hold us accountable. You call us up. You say, well, what the hell are you doing? That's not what I sent you to do. Why aren't you putting in an amendment to try to fix the problem in that bill before you vote for it? We have to do more. And a lot of Democrats are putting out really great legislation, but some of them could be combined. That was literally one of the reasons I feel like my dad moved to this, environmental justice for all, because there were all these little pieces. Everyone had pieces of it. We have to do that collectively and make it a plan that everyone says, I know that this is what I have to vote for, and this is what it means.
Thank you, Donna.
I agree, because you heard as much, and you know this, Adelita. We heard as much yesterday of people disappointed and angry with Democrats as they are with Republicans. So you're right on the money. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot say enough about how distinct Chris is in contrast to the candidate that, to not mince any words, is being pushed upon the 26th district by the establishment wing of the California Democratic Party. And Chris is definitely going in not as the favored choice of the establishment of the party, but I believe the candidate whose policies and advocacy is in line with the majority of Democratic voters in the district. And Chris, just your thoughts on all of that, and then reflections on what you've heard from Adelita and from Donna and Dan and everybody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Alan. We are up against the establishment, and the reality is that my main opponent, Jackie Irwin, has received ungodly amounts of money from law enforcement, from private real estate developers, from other corporate interests. And her votes in the state assembly reflect that in a district that is a majority minority district. She has voted against demasking ICE in the state legislature. She has refused to fund bilingual education. She has voted against overtime pay for farm workers. And that kind of Democrat is wildly out of step with the district. I saw what Joe Manchin did to our climate and clean energy ambitions. I saw what Joe Lieberman did to our healthcare options and the public option. Gone are the days when having a D behind your name is enough. This community deserves a progressive voice who's going to represent their values and interests. And that's why I'm in this race. And, one thing I will say, I had the privilege of working on Congresswoman Grijalva's special election campaign. She is the same person now as she was in that race. And I think she, more than anyone, what I've learned from her is that the best thing you can offer voters is sincerity and authenticity. And she what we need right now. Her dad would remind me that in his first congressional race, he was outspent to race. But in order to do that, we need people power. And that's where PDA really comes in and can make the difference in this campaign. Our website is espinosaforcongress.com. We could use support from grassroots donors, just like the folks on this call. We could use volunteer power and capacity. And that's what's going to get us to the finish line. And hopefully we'll be able to offer this community and the next Congress a more progressive pathway and a better future that we all want to see. Not just something that manages the decline, but a continuance of the march for progress.
No, thank you so much. And by the way, and I'll be in touch about this, and everybody in California, and Mike Thaler and I will work on this at PDACA. Now, you're a federal candidate, but we're going to probably be working on putting together a slate of some of the really great progressives who are up running in California in the California primary. And you, my friend, will be at the top of the new list of non-incumbents among congressional candidates. And so, there's actually a fantastic candidate running for lieutenant governor. You probably know what I'm talking about. It's not the purview of this meeting, since we're the federal PAC that's meeting here to talk about that. But there's some great people running for state assembly that we really want to lift up and really try to make clear, because people don't know that much. Chris knows this, and I know this, and I don't know how even aware PDA activists are around the country. One way of pointing it out to Californians, people who aren't in California, is to say, look, none of the squad members were from California. Raul Grijalva wasn't from California. And we really ended up in a situation, because we are the largest economy in the country, we're the richest state in the country, and we're a single party state. And that meant that people who otherwise would be pouring money into the Republican Party were pouring money into the Democratic Party to keep it a moderate party. And so therefore, it became a real structural problem in California. But candidates like Chris Espinosa v. Jackie Irwin would be a breakthrough. And if we can make that breakthrough in California, it's going to have an impact around the country. And in going back to one of my initial points, I think it's going to have a big impact with Latino voters around the country, to have a true community advocate like Adelita Grijalva to be joined by Chris Espinosa in the U.S. Congress. It'll make a difference nationally there too. So final thoughts as we wrap up. I know Dan O'Neill had his hand up. Dan, if you want to come back, but final thoughts, maybe let's go Chris to Adelita, and we'll have you back, Chris, and Dan O'Neill too. But Chris, take it away.
I just want to again thank PDA for giving me an audience today to look at our the stakes before our country. You'll help us address those three crises of a cost of living, a climate crisis, and a crisis in our democracy. We need all the support we can get, and I'm honored to be a part of PDA.
Thank you so much. Adelita, take it away.
Thank you all for joining, for your advocacy, for the fire that you bring. It's really important. I know that this can be very tiring and it's exhausting when you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and back at it. But you have to remember each and every one of us, and in our histories, we've seen our generations before us fight battles and win. And this is the one that we're going to win. We have to stay organized, stay together, lift each other up. And sí lo podemos hacer. Juntos lo podemos hacer. We can do it together. So thank you for always being there and to inspire when we're feeling a little bit run down too.
Well, and let everybody remember that Adelita played a heroic role and did it so brilliantly because you were just yourself, as Chris said. I mean, you were thrown into this crazy situation where you were kept out of Congress because of something that 80% of the population wanted to see, which is opening up the Epstein files. And of course, it was upon your entry into Congress that then things unfolded the way that they did. And then our friend Ro became a folk hero. And so did Massey. And maybe even, one of the crazy things there is my talking point for people being in this Congress. What's it like to be up there with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene? Even that made her a little bit sane or more sane and made a breakthrough. But you played that brilliantly, I have to say, and you did it by being yourself throughout. So thank you on behalf of all of us, and we're so proud to support you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for all of your help and support.
Thank you. And final thought, Dan O'Neill, if you want to come forward. Daniel, can you unmute? I see you had your hand up. We are sometimes a little technologically challenged here, but maybe Donna, your final thoughts?
Oh, just thank you. I know Dan, there he is. He's back. He must be having technical issues. Dan, can you unmute?
He can unmute himself.
He can. Just thank you, Chris. Oh my gosh, how wonderful this campaign sounds. I can't wait to see you get in Congress and fight in Congress, because I know it'll be the right kind of fight, and that's what we need. I know people always say it's just as easy to win the right fights as it is to win.
Oh, there it is. Wow.
I'll send it off to Dan. It's all yours, Dan, and thank you both, Chris and Adelita.
Well,
thank you, Donna.
I'm sorry, you guys. My computer crashed and I had to run to another room. But anyway, I just want to briefly say thank you, Adelita. Thank you, Chris. Let's work together. Let's get Chris over the top so Adelita and Chris can be in DC and kick some butt. All right? Everybody on PDA, let's get to work on this one. Okay. Thank you, Adelita. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, too. Thank you, Adelita. And with that, Mike Fox, why don't we bring you forward here? You can give us a little bit of a roundup on where we stand on our PDA to-dos, and I can sign out with a ribbon and bow across this week's town hall, and you can go to family time, and there can be an open discussion with PDAers.
Cool.
And how's that? Sounds good, Mike?
Yes, it sounds lovely. So I'm going to do my favorite job here real quick so the recording gets to hear these people's names. And that is thanks to the following people who have donated today. They include Beth and Chuck, Patricia, Dr. Sonneborn, double doing as always, phone banker Karen, double doing. Dr. Sonneborn, again, 2 donations. Thank you, brother. And thank you, Jim, Debbie, Dorothy, as always, for your more than kind $100, Dorothy. Anybody who can match or beat that, pile on. I'm sure Dorothy would appreciate the solidarity. And excuse me, the presenters have been brilliant today. And because of that, we're behind on fundraising and on volunteer shifts. So we got to make something happen here, gang. And thank you to phone banker Maggie, who also donated. And Nadine and Dr. Sonneborn, again, he's on fire today. And Beth again. And phone banker Beverly down here in St. Pete with me. And Jan out in Ohio. Aaron out in Arizona, phone banking as well. Becky, Francesca, Samuel, phone banker Mary, Phone banker William, Pat, thank you for your kind sustaining donation. We're still 3 short on those, gangs, so please do pile on. Likewise, Edward, they were back-to-back sustainers. Thank you, Edward. Phone banker Betsy, Kathleen, Neil, as always, and Margaret, phone banker Erica, phone banker Mary, phone banker Aaron again, donating twice. Thank you, brother. Phone banker Michael, phone banker Mary Ellen. Listen to all those double doers. And Michael out of Chicago, who starts us off every week. So thank you to all of those folks. Stick around, gang. After Alan puts the bow on this, we'll dive into family time and get to those goals that we have established. So back to you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Mike. And with that, I'm going to wrap up today's PDA Town Hall. And I thank Chris Espinosa, a great candidate out in California's 26th district, for the open seat of that congressional district in California. The primary is coming up in early June. So just a couple months ago, but we're going to PDA, we're going to try to do a big progressive push out there with Chris front and center as a candidate that will be really promoting for people to support. And of course, for those people who are it's an open primary in California for all constituents in the 26th district to support. And I want to thank Adelita Grijalva, a new champion of ours inside the U.S. halls of Congress. And of course, we're looking for, yes, the Democratic Party to get a majority coming out of the midterms and to really allow voices like Adelita to have a stronger hand in American politics with the Democrats in the majority there, of course. I'm going to thank, of course, Phyllis Bennis, who was on for the first hour with her analysis of the war on Iran and the situation in Palestine, as well as what progressives can do to really reframe the national dialogue on foreign policy. And of course, I want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank Donna, Dan, Mike Fox, of course, and William Walters spoke as well, all the PDA staffers in the background. And most of all, for this week, I want to thank everybody who has sent me condolences and kind words. It's a difficult time, but my mom would want me to be here, and I'm going to be here going forward with her in my heart throughout. So thank you to everybody, and we'll be back again next week with another PDA Town Hall. Mike Fox, take it away, and I'll be rejoining my family here